My phone buzzed while I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a half-eaten plate of spaghetti. I picked it up, expecting another boring group chat notification. Then I saw it. "Don't come home. We're done." "Dad." I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. After everything I'd done for them, after the years I spent bailing my brother Luke out, covering their bills, keeping the family business afloat, they just threw me away with a text. I typed back slowly, my fingers trembling, "Okay. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends." I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even hesitate. I just put the phone down and let the words sink in. For years, I had tried to earn their respect. I had given them my time, my energy, my money, and they never saw me. Luke could do no wrong. I had been invisible. But not anymore. I wasn't going to chase them. I wasn't going to fix things that weren't mine to fix. If they wanted me gone, fine. I'd give them exactly that. Silence. No calls. No money. No explanations. Just me, standing for myself for the first time in my life. Growing up, our house always felt like Luke's kingdom. Dad ran the family construction business like it was a legacy worth guarding, and Mom, well, she just followed his lead. Every achievement Luke had was celebrated like a holiday. Every mistake I made, or even thought about, was ignored, criticized, or forgotten. I remember sitting at the dinner table, coloring books in front of me, while Dad lectured me on how I should help in the business. "Noah, you'll learn responsibility," he said, his tone sharp. Luke would smile, nod, or sometimes get excused from chores altogether. I tried to prove myself. I worked extra jobs in high school to help with bills. I stayed late to tutor Luke when he struggled with math. I even fixed mistakes in the business quietly, hoping someone would notice. But no one did. Even Mom, who I thought might be on my side, would just nod at Luke and glance at me like I didn't exist. That favoritism carved a permanent divide in our family. I started learning early, it wasn't enough to work hard or care, it had to be the right kid, the one Dad and Mom chose to love. And now, that choice had finally been made. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. I can still remember the Christmas when it all started to feel unfair. I was 12, excited to show Dad the model I built for a small bridge in my school project. I had stayed up late, carefully gluing tiny pieces together, painting every beam. I ran into the living room, holding it proudly. "Look, Dad. I finished it." He glanced at it for a second, then shook his head. "Nice, Noah, but Luke just got the best grade in his class. Let's focus on him." I froze. My stomach sank. Mom smiled at Luke like he'd just cured a disease. I barely heard her whisper a quiet, "Good job, Noah," before she turned back to Luke's achievements. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I wondered why no matter how hard I tried, I could never be enough. Luke could mess up, forget responsibilities, or act lazy, and they would cheer him on. I worked twice as hard just to be noticed, and still, nothing. It wasn't just Christmas or school projects. It was every birthday, every family dinner, every little success I had quietly celebrated myself. They had already chosen their favorite, and I was invisible. That feeling stayed with me, shaping every choice I made, every dream I chased quietly, knowing it might never be enough. By the time I finished high school, I was done trying to earn their approval. I had spent years covering Luke's mistakes, working extra jobs to help pay for bills, and quietly saving for college, all while Dad acted like my efforts didn't exist. Then came the final straw. Luke had managed to ruin one of Dad's construction contracts by skipping important meetings. I stayed up all night helping fix it, making calls, rearranging schedules, even personally covering a $2,000 shortfall from my savings. The next morning, I walked into the living room, expecting at least a thank you. Dad didn't even look at me. "Luke, you're learning responsibility," he said. Luke just smiled, leaning back in his chair. Mom laughed softly, like she found it amusing. And me? I was invisible again. I realized something that day. I had given everything, my time, my energy, my money, and received nothing but indifference. Every sacrifice, every late night, every dollar spent, it didn't matter. That's when I made a choice. I wouldn't beg anymore. I wouldn't chase them or try to prove myself. If they wanted me out, fine. I'd step away and focus on my life, on what I could control. No more being invisible. No more being taken for granted. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything I had done for my family. I had paid bills, fixed Luke's mistakes, even covered Dad's business emergencies. And for what? They didn't see me. They didn't care. I realized something important: I couldn't force them to respect me. I couldn't buy their love or approval. It had been years of giving, and I was left empty. Something had to change. I made a decision. I wasn't going to chase them anymore. No more calls. No more money. No more excuses for Luke's failures. I would focus on my own life, my own dreams, and my own future. It felt terrifying at first. Walking away from family, even when they treated me poorly, felt wrong. But deep down, I knew it was right. I needed to protect myself, to stop being the family's safety net. I opened my laptop and started researching ways to grow my career in freelance tech design. If they wouldn't see my worth, I would create a life they couldn't ignore. One day, they would realize what they lost, but that wouldn't be my concern. This was the beginning. My life, my rules. I didn't know exactly where to start, but I knew I had to try. I spent that weekend cleaning my tiny apartment, organizing my workspace, and setting up my laptop like it was my command center. Freelance tech design had always been my passion, but now it was more than that, it was my lifeline. The first few days were rough. Clients were slow to respond, projects were small, and I doubted myself constantly. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced for a call from Dad asking for money or Luke needing another bailout. But no calls came. Part of me felt relief, part of me felt emptiness. I started networking online, sending my portfolio to potential clients, and pitching ideas I had shelved for years. It wasn't glamorous, long hours, tight deadlines, and barely enough pay to cover rent, but it was mine. I was doing it for me, not for anyone else. Late at night, I'd look at the ceiling, remembering the text from Dad. "We're done." I thought about how much that message had hurt, but also how freeing it felt. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was building my own world, one project at a time, and no one could stop me. A week into my new routine, I got a call from Tara, Luke's wife. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but her voice was shaking when she said, "Noah, you need to know something about Luke." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then whispered, "He's been taking money from Dad's business, secretly. Hundreds of dollars, maybe more. That's why the bills keep piling up, and why Dad keeps asking you to help." My stomach dropped. I had suspected Luke was careless, but this was deliberate. Betrayal ran through me hotter than anger. All those times I covered his mistakes, all the money I sent, all the hours I sacrificed, they weren't just ignored. They were used against me. I thanked Tara quietly and hung up, my mind racing. I could feel the pieces falling into place: Dad's constant frustration, the mysterious cash shortages, Luke's smug attitude. They hadn't needed me because they thought I would always cover for them. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't just angry, I was awake. From now on, I wouldn't just protect myself, I would make sure the truth came out. I wasn't invisible anymore. After the call from Tara, I couldn't stop thinking about Luke. Every time I remembered his smirk, his careless words, the way Dad always excused him, I felt a fire burning inside me. That fire pushed me to work harder than ever. I spent long nights designing websites, fixing apps, and pitching projects to companies I had once thought were out of reach. Every completed project, every client email that praised my work, fueled my determination. I wasn't just building a career, I was building proof that I could succeed without their approval, without their money, without their recognition. I kept careful records of every project, every payment, every email. I knew one day, the truth about Luke's hidden theft would come out, and I wanted to be untouchable when it did. Even with all the work, I never let anger consume me. I channeled it into strategy, patience, and skill. I was no longer the kid who cried silently at family dinners. I was Noah Shawn, and every late night and early morning brought me closer to the life I deserved, and the reckoning that was coming. Months of late nights and constant emails finally paid off. A mid-sized tech company in Tulsa noticed my work and offered me a contract to redesign their entire website and internal software system. The pay wasn't small, enough to cover all my expenses and still save. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the confirmation email, my hands trembling. For the first time, I felt power and independence. This wasn't just money, it was validation. They couldn't dismiss me anymore. I had built something real, something they couldn't ignore. I still remembered Dad's text, "We're done." The sting had faded, replaced by determination. Luke's theft, Dad's favoritism, Mom's silence, it all fueled me. I realized that success wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about taking control of my life. I threw myself into the project, working late nights, perfecting every detail, and impressing the client beyond their expectations. By the end, they asked me to manage future updates and even referred me to another company. That day, I sat back, exhausted but alive, and thought, this is just the beginning. One day, they'll see what they lost. And I'll be untouchable when it happens. A few weeks after my first big contract, I got another message from Tara. She sounded nervous, almost scared. "Noah, there's more," she said. I sat down, gripping my phone. "What is it?" "She's talking about Luke's hidden accounts. He's been siphoning money for years, even from Dad." I found spreadsheets, receipts, everything. My blood ran cold. Every missing dollar, every sudden bill Dad complained about, every time I had been asked to cover expenses, it had all been because of Luke. And they had never seen it. Not even a hint. I stared at the wall, mind racing. I could feel the beginnings of a plan forming. I had built my life slowly, quietly, while they ignored me. Now, I had proof, and I had the skills to make sure it mattered. I thanked Tara, careful to reassure her I'd protect her. I couldn't act recklessly, this had to be precise. Every step had to be calculated. I wasn't just angry, I was strategic now. Luke thought he could use Dad's favoritism and my silence to his advantage. But he didn't know I had both time and patience on my side. The reckoning was coming, and I would make sure it hit where it hurt most. After Tara's revelation, I knew I couldn't rush anything. Revenge wasn't about anger, it was about precision. I spent days going through every scrap of information she gave me, cross-referencing receipts, account statements, and emails. Every hidden payment Luke had made, every discrepancy in the business finances, I documented. I created a secure folder on my laptop, backed it up, and labeled everything. Each file felt like a piece of a puzzle I had been missing for years. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became, Luke had been using their favoritism and my silence to cover his tracks. But I didn't stop there. I quietly asked a few trusted clients and friends in the business if they had noticed unusual spending or accounting errors in Dad's construction projects. Slowly, a web of evidence formed. Every time I reviewed it, I felt more confident, more powerful. For the first time, I wasn't just the kid ignored at family dinners. I was the one holding the truth. And when the time came, the people who had dismissed me, taken advantage of me, and treated me like invisible would face consequences they couldn't ignore. I wasn't ready to confront Luke directly yet. That would be reckless. Instead, I decided to test the waters, subtly dropping hints about what I knew. A few casual comments to mutual friends, mentioning financial mismanagement, careful enough not to give myself away. The reaction was immediate. People I trusted looked surprised, then concerned. Slowly, rumors reached the family business circles. I stayed in the background, silent, letting the seeds grow. Every whisper chipped away at Luke's untouchable image. Meanwhile, I continued building my career. More clients came through referrals, impressed not only with my work but my professionalism. Every success strengthened my position. I was no longer just Noah Shawn, the ignored son, I was Noah Shawn, the man with influence and proof. I knew patience was key. I couldn't rush. Luke had been careless for years, but his mistakes had gone unnoticed because everyone assumed Dad would catch them. Now, my evidence and growing reputation made it dangerous for him. For the first time, I felt a sense of calm. I wasn't acting out of anger, I was acting with purpose. The day I revealed everything, it wouldn't just be shocking, it would be inevitable. It happened sooner than I expected. One of Dad's longtime suppliers called me directly, asking for clarification on a series of missing payments. I calmly explained what I had discovered and shared the documents Tara had given me. The supplier was stunned. "We had no idea Luke was doing this," they said. "Thank you for bringing it to our attention." I hung up feeling a rush of satisfaction. For the first time, I saw the cracks forming in Luke's carefully maintained image. He had always counted on his charm and Dad's trust to cover his tracks, but now the truth was seeping out, and I was controlling the flow. That night, I reviewed my evidence again. Each document, each spreadsheet, each email felt heavier in my hands. I had the proof, the leverage, and the momentum. I realized just how much power I had accumulated quietly while the family ignored me. Luke was panicking, I knew it. And the more he tried to cover his mistakes, the more mistakes he made. It was a cycle I could use to my advantage. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was winning, and I hadn't even revealed my full hand. I decided it was time to move beyond whispers. Luke had to feel the pressure, to understand that I wasn't the kid he could manipulate anymore. I sent a carefully worded email to Dad's accountant, highlighting discrepancies in Luke's handling of the company funds, backed by the evidence Tara had given me. I didn't add any personal commentary. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. Within hours, the accountant called me. "Noah, these numbers don't add up. Are you sure about this?" I calmly confirmed everything I had discovered. The shock in their voice was palpable. I knew the news would reach Dad soon. And when it did, Luke would feel the walls closing in. He had relied on secrecy, on his family's trust, on the assumption that I would always cover for him. But I had played the long game. That night, I sat back in my apartment, sipping coffee, feeling the weight of satisfaction. I had taken the first step, not in anger, but in strategy. Every move I made now would be precise, calculated, and deliberate. Luke thought he had the upper hand. He didn't. The game had just begun, and I was already ahead. The next morning, I got the first sign that my plan was working. Luke called Dad in a frenzy, pacing the length of the restaurant like a caged animal. I wasn't there, of course, but I could imagine the panic in his voice. Dad's secretary texted me a few details after overhearing the conversation. Luke's bravado had disappeared. The confident smirk, the careless jokes, they were gone. He was stumbling, desperate, trying to explain missing funds and hidden accounts. Dad was furious, and I knew he was starting to question everything he had trusted for years. I smiled quietly, sipping my coffee, feeling a rush of vindication. Years of being ignored, dismissed, and used had built up this perfect storm of timing, patience, and strategy. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't barged in, I had let the truth speak for itself. For the first time, I felt like I held the power. Not just over Luke, but over the family dynamic that had tormented me for years. I made a promise to myself, I wouldn't stop here. This was only the beginning. I would expose the full truth, and when I did, there would be no room for lies, excuses, or favoritism. Luke had underestimated me. Big mistake. With Luke panicking, I knew I had momentum. I doubled down on my work, taking on bigger projects and building my reputation in the city. Every new client, every successful contract, strengthened my independence. I didn't need my family's approval, or their money, anymore. I also started quietly consulting with Dad's accountant and a few trusted employees. They were shocked by the discrepancies, but grateful someone had finally uncovered the truth. I stayed calm and professional, making sure no one could link my actions to revenge, at least, not yet. This was about strategy, not impulsive anger. Meanwhile, I watched Luke struggle to keep the business afloat while hiding his mistakes. Each failed attempt at covering the gaps only strengthened my position. I had proof, influence, and confidence, all the tools I needed for the next phase of my plan. One night, I reviewed my evidence and smiled. It was no longer just about revenge, it was about justice. I could see the path clearly now, expose Luke fully, regain control over what I had sacrificed, and finally prove that I was worth more than their favoritism had ever acknowledged. For the first time in years, I felt completely untouchable. I realized the next step was to apply subtle public pressure. If Luke thought he could hide his mistakes, I had to make him feel exposure was inevitable. I started casually sharing insights about business accountability and transparency on my professional social media, nothing personal, just general lessons backed by real examples. Soon, colleagues and friends started noticing. Comments popped up, interesting take on financial responsibility, and, wish more companies prioritize transparency. I smiled quietly. Each like, each share, each message from someone in Dad's circles was another invisible nudge toward Luke. I wasn't attacking him directly, but the message was clear, mistakes, especially hidden ones, had consequences. I watched from a distance as murmurs began circulating in the restaurant network. Luke grew paranoid, he checked emails obsessively, made frantic calls, and even questioned Dad about imaginary leaks. It was exhilarating to see the shift. For the first time, Luke wasn't untouchable, he was vulnerable. And I held the pieces that could topple him completely. I leaned back, thinking of Tara's warning, my meticulous documentation, and my growing influence. Every calculated step brought me closer to the reckoning I'd imagined for years. Luke thought he was safe. He wasn't. Not anymore. With Luke scrambling, I knew it was time to see how much Dad really understood. I didn't confront him directly, not yet. Instead, I dropped a subtle hint during a casual call. Dad, I said, I was going over some business numbers and noticed a few unusual discrepancies. It's amazing how much can go unnoticed when people assume everything is fine. There was a pause. I could almost hear him processing my words. Really? He asked, cautious. I stayed calm. Yeah. I've been helping a friend audit a small project, and it made me realize how much oversight matters. It's crazy how small mistakes can add up over time. I let it hang there, no accusations, just implications. The next day, Dad called Luke into the office unexpectedly. I wasn't present, but I got a text from Tara, he's asking questions. Luke's panicking. A quiet satisfaction settled over me. My subtle move had sparked doubt in Dad's mind. The walls around Luke were crumbling, and I had orchestrated the first cracks. For years, Dad's favoritism had seemed unshakable. But now, I could see the beginning of change, and I was ready to push it further. By now, I knew it was time to gather the last pieces. Tara had given me most of what I needed, but I wanted absolute certainty before confronting the family. I spent days combing through bank statements, invoices, emails, and contracts, every shred of proof Luke had tried to hide. It wasn't just about exposing him anymore. It was about showing Dad and Mom the truth they had ignored for years. Every missing payment, every forged receipt, every sneaky transfer, it all painted a picture of deception that could no longer be denied. I organized everything into a single, secure file. Each folder had a timeline, annotated notes, and cross-referenced evidence. This wasn't revenge out of anger, it was revenge with precision. I wanted the truth to hit like a hammer, not a whisper. I double-checked every detail. No mistakes. No room for doubt. For the first time, I felt completely in control. I wasn't just Noah Shawn, the ignored son, I was the man with the power to expose lies, right wrongs, and reclaim my worth. When I finally opened the conversation with the family, there would be no denying the truth. Every favor they'd taken for granted, every betrayal they'd hidden, would be laid bare. Luke thought he was untouchable. He wasn't. I spent the next few days preparing mentally for the confrontation. This wasn't going to be a shouting match or a bitter argument. I wanted every word, every piece of evidence, to land with precision. I printed copies of all the files, organized them into neat folders, and reviewed the timeline again. Each transaction, every hidden account, every falsified receipt, it all had to be undeniable. No excuses, no emotional exaggeration. Just facts. I also rehearsed what I would say. My voice had to stay calm, controlled, unshaken. Years of feeling invisible had taught me how to keep my composure, even when the anger inside threatened to explode. Tara checked in one last time. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I nodded. "It's time they see the truth. And they'll see it exactly how it is, no sugarcoating." That night, I went over my plan one final time. I knew this confrontation would change everything. The family that had dismissed me, used me, and ignored me for years would have to face me, and the evidence I held. For the first time in my life, I felt fully ready. Noah Shawn wasn't just the overlooked son anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. I arrived at the family home early, my folders tucked under my arm. Dad, Mom, and Luke were waiting, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. For years, they had dismissed me, ignored my successes, and taken advantage of my help. Now, the tables had turned. I didn't hesitate. "I've gathered everything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Every transaction, every hidden account, every lie you've told. It's all here." Dad shifted in his chair, his jaw tight. Luke's smirk had vanished, replaced by visible anxiety. Mom's eyes darted between us, uncertain. I began presenting the evidence, step by step. Every document, every receipt, every irregularity was displayed clearly. I didn't add commentary or emotion. I let the facts speak. Luke's face grew red with panic as he realized there was no escape. Dad's hands trembled slightly as he leafed through the folders. Mom looked away, unable to meet my eyes. For years, I had been invisible, overlooked, and undervalued. Now, as I stood there holding the truth, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't just confronting them, I was reclaiming my power. This was the moment the family had ignored for too long. And I was ready. The room fell silent as I finished laying out the evidence. Luke's hands shook as he tried to speak, but no words came out. Dad's face was pale, his pride wounded, and Mom's eyes filled with tears, part guilt, part shock. You've been hiding this from me?" Dad finally managed, his voice low. "I wasn't hiding, I said calmly. I was ignored. You dismissed me, used me, and never took the time to see the truth. I've spent years trying to keep everything afloat while being treated like I didn't matter. Luke stammered, "It's not." I didn't, but I cut him off with a glance. Look at the documents. Every missing payment, every false receipt, every sneaky transfer. This is your reality, Luke. Not mine. Mom choked back a sob. I didn't know. You did know, I said softly. You just chose to look the other way. Every time I helped, every time I saved this family, it was taken for granted. Not anymore. For the first time in years, I felt seen. The power had shifted. The family that had once controlled me now had to face the consequences of their choices. Luke's empire of lies was unraveling, and I was the one holding the final thread. The tension in the room was thick, but I felt lighter than I had in years. The evidence had done its job, Luke's lies were exposed, and Dad and Mom had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. I took a deep breath. I'm done being your safety net, I said, my voice steady. No more bailing out Luke. No more covering restaurant expenses. No more sacrifices for people who don't see my worth. Dad swallowed hard, his pride battling his realization. Mom's tears glistened in the dim light, but she didn't interrupt. Luke's face twisted with frustration and panic, but I didn't flinch. I've spent years building my life while you ignored me, I continued. Now, I'm choosing myself. I'll help if I want to, but it will be on my terms. Respect is not optional, it's required. I felt a surge of empowerment. For years, I had been invisible, dismissed, and undervalued. Today, that ended. I gathered my folders and stood. Consider this the first step, I said. I'll continue to live my life fully, without guilt, without manipulation, and without being taken for granted. I'm Noah Shawn, and I'm done being the backup plan. For the first time, I walked away feeling free. I didn't need to watch the fallout firsthand to know it was happening. Within days, Luke's mistakes had caught up with him. Vendors began demanding payments he couldn't cover. His credibility crumbled, and whispers of his embezzlement spread throughout the business community. Dad and Mom retreated into silence, their pride and reputation battered. The empire they had built, the one they had thought invincible, was unraveling without my support. Every missed payment, every legal threat, and every exposure of Luke's lies was a reminder that their choices had consequences, and I wasn't there to fix them anymore. I stayed focused on my own life, expanding my projects, taking on international clients, and investing in my design firm. The sale of my sustainable project had given me financial freedom, and I finally understood what it felt like to live without fear of being overlooked or dismissed. Occasionally, I heard updates through mutual contacts, Luke facing lawsuits, Dad struggling to manage the remaining restaurants, Mom isolated and regretful. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken. For the first time, I realized that my independence, my success, and my boundaries were the ultimate revenge. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their gratitude. I had myself, and that was more than enough. A year had passed since the confrontation. Life felt lighter, freer, and fully my own. I no longer carried the weight of my family's mistakes, lies, or expectations. Every day, I woke up knowing I had earned my success, not because I saved anyone else, but because I built my life with determination, talent, and integrity. My design firm had grown beyond anything I imagined. International clients, sustainable projects, and a team I could trust made every day exciting. I thrived in a world where my skills mattered, and my contributions were recognized. No one dismissed me, and no one took me for granted. Sometimes, I thought about Dad, Mom, and Luke. The anger I once carried had faded, replaced by quiet satisfaction. I hadn't sought revenge for spite, I had sought justice, and it had been delivered. They faced the consequences of their choices, and I had reclaimed my life. Sitting in my office, reviewing a project proposal, I smiled. The past no longer defined me. I had boundaries, self-respect, and freedom. I was Noah Shawn, a man who had turned betrayal into strength, pain into empowerment, and dismissal into triumph. Finally, I was home, with myself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.